Awesome. Thank you very much. We are super, super excited to be here today to talk about probably one of the top topics in cloud outside of technology itself, and that is value, right? My name's Chris Wegman. I'm a senior managing director with Accenture. I've been in the cloud space probably 12 or so years and mainly with AWS. So I oversee all the Amazon work that Accenture does, what we build with Amazon and what we deliver. I am super thrilled to be here with one of my favorite clients, and that is Merck. We're going to today talk about value and how at Merck we are working together to build real enterprise value. And I'm not just talking about cost savings. I'm not talking about taking cost out of infrastructure. And this is one of the top topics I hear from my clients every day. We've moved to the cloud. We've started our journey. We're somewhere in our journey. We're optimizing our usage of AWS. But how do I really drive business value? And I think this example, the BlueSky program, which we're going to talk about today, is a fabulous example of how the team is taking that cost savings and driving value for the business. So I'm super excited. I've got some of my favorite clients here. Sorry, I'll get back to the right slide here. So I'm going to start with Ron Kim, who's the CTO, Senior Vice President and CTO at Merck. I got Fran Geetens, who's the Vice President, Technology Infrastructure, Operations and Experience. Sean Finity, who's the Associate Vice President of Cloud Infrastructure and Technology. I've had the pleasure of working with these guys for the last 2 years during their cloud journey. So to get us kicked off, I'm sure you guys all know who Merck is, but I'm going to ask Fran to talk a little bit about Merck.
Yeah, Chris, thanks. And thank you all for being here today. I'd say that we're equally excited to tell our story because it's an important one for us, and because of the work that we do within our company, it's an important one for the planet. If you can go to the next slide, Chris. So I think an overview of Merck needs to be anchored in our purpose. It's the reason I come to work every day, and our statement of purpose is simple. It's to use the power of leading edge science to save and improve lives. We talk about that often in our company. Beyond that purpose, some of the fundamentals that underpin our business are on the slide in front of you. We have 4 key pillars that make up the bread and butter of our business. They're prescription medicines, vaccines, biologic therapies, and then a comprehensive set of animal health products. The combination of that portfolio brought to bear, just north of $48 billion in revenue last year, with about half of those sales originating outside the U.S. Research and development is a core staple to our company and an enabler for our purpose. And we spend in accord with the same. So last year, north of $12 billion spent in research and development of new products to save and improve lives. We have a global footprint, as you'd expect. That said, we're headquartered in beautiful Rahway, New Jersey. We have about 68,000 people who make up our company, and then importantly, for those of you that are joining from a different geography, outside of the United States and Canada, you probably know us as MSD.
So Fran, I know you guys have been in the cloud for a while. This isn't your first journey into the cloud. You've been using AWS for many years. Can you talk to me a little bit about this BlueSky program and what it's doing for your IT organization?
Yeah, so BlueSky, in simple terms, is our company's cloud acceleration program. And with this program, we are fundamentally transforming the IT landscape within our company, not just from a technology perspective, but importantly, how we work every day. Beyond the name and beyond the numbers that we'll talk about, the fundamentals of our intent with BlueSky are really, really simple. It's to modernize the way that we work in an intention, in an effort to fundamentally transform our IT spend profile while simultaneously creating a platform that allows us to drive increased business innovation at a more rapid and cost-effective pace. That's what BlueSky is in a nutshell. You may be wondering, all right, well, how are you guys going about that? And the fundamental approach that we've chosen to embrace is to systematically evaluate every application in our entire estate. And each gets dispositioned. If it's something that's no longer required for our business, we retire the application. If it is eligible or capable to move to the cloud, we do that as well. And then last but certainly not least is an intention to modernize applications as we move them to the cloud, in favor of full stack end-to-end automation, because it's a giant source of value, and Sean's going to talk about that a little bit later. We are prosecuting this body of work over a 39-month window. We've developed a business case that I'll describe shortly, that's been to the top of our company from a perspective of review, alignment, and most notably sponsorship to drive this set of activities. When all is said and done, we intend to capture north of $275 million in annual savings that can be plowed back into the important work we do in support of the planet. So that's what BlueSky is in a nutshell. Chris, you'll probably ask me next about the
You're exactly right.
The game plan.
I think what you talked about, right, is this started out very much as a traditional cloud migration modernization program. We developed that business case. It was high level, right? It wasn't down to the penny. Can you talk about a little bit about, before we get into the phases and the tranches we've gone through, is kind of how that's changed to value, right? And not just about counting the number of servers we retire or, migrate.
Yeah, a few thoughts and reflections, and keep me honest if you wanted to steer this in a different direction. But underpinning this business case that I've made reference to is an unambiguous intention to capture value that we are fully committed to. The bunch of us up here on the stage are better jobs on this. No other way to look at it. That said, and beyond the numbers, the real intention with this is to fundamentally transform the way that we work, in favor of an agile, automated approach that gives us a differentiated platform to do the important work in the company at the pace that's being demanded from all of us. That's really the end game.
Awesome. So I think, I've seen a lot of programs set these, great goals, right? 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, whatever it is, one single plan. Can you talk a little bit about the tranches and kind of how you guys took that agile model and applied it to the program as well?
Yeah, before I do, just a little bit of relevant history or background. We started this body of work, as Chris alluded to previously, a couple years ago. So it was early 21 when the bunch of us, along with many in the audience, had started to work on what we called Phase 0. Phase 0 is about exploration, scoping, really refining our intent that I talked about previously, and then bringing all that together in the context of a well-articulated business case that we could better jobs on. That took us to a next order discussion. How are we going to tackle this? So like any large program or transformation effort, we broke this up into chunks. We called those chunks tranches. So tranche 1 we started on in November of last year and drew to a close in June of this year. And that tranche was really about bootstrapping the program, starting and choosing to start strong. And what we had done in the context of that tranche is lean into the approach I described before, systematically review applications, retire those that we don't need, rehost and modernize. Along the way, importantly, with tranche 1 was laying a foundation that would serve us well over the duration of the program. But what we spoke about often at the time, in fact we still do, is to earn the right to continue to play. Earn the right to continue to execute the program because it's not inexpensive, but there's a significant value proposition in the way of return. So unambiguous capture of business value that we're really here to talk about today was well steeped in that first tranche. Tranche 2, which we're focused on executing right now, has a steadfast approach. We're still all about retire, rehost, modernize, but we're really, really focused now on scale up everything, especially our ability to capture business value. And we're going to do this throughout the life of the program. That said, and I guess maybe one last point, tranche 3 represents another inflection point for us next year. And it too will come with a steadfast set of activities, but at a significantly higher scale. And what will be differentiated when we prosecute tranche 3 is an agenda that have us calling on the development community throughout our company to embrace self-service, leverage the platforms and capabilities that we've laid with BlueSky, in contrast to the way that we're working now, which dominantly lean on factories that are under Sean's direct remit to do the work I had described.
Awesome. No, I appreciate it, Fran. I think it's really interesting. As I mentioned before, every decision is based on value, right? So whether or not to move the application isn't the decision, right? Should it stay or should it go? It's the value that gets created around that. So, I guess, Sean, why don't you talk a little bit about how each of the categories were created, and really why BlueSky? It's an interesting name, right? But why'd you pick that name?
Thanks, Chris. So hey everybody, it's great to be here. Sean Finnerty, I run the BlueSky program. I also am responsible for cloud landing zones, our data centers, our edge strategy, and a variety of supporting services around that for the enterprise. So as Fran mentioned in his talk track, right, we retire, rehost, modernize. For anybody who's been in the cloud game for a while, those aren't new concepts, right? We've been talking about 6 Rs and cloud migrations for 10 years now. What we decided to do was take those concepts, simplify them down so that it's easy to understand at all levels of the organization. Our CEO understands this construct, what we're doing on cloud and why we're doing it from a value perspective, but then be very intentional about these categories and what do they mean, and more importantly, in the application portfolio, which apps do we land in these categories? When we started the program, it was more of a, hey, we just need numbers, go find stuff and get them in the buckets and let's get working on it. Now, as Chris and Fran alluded to, we're being much more thoughtful about what goes into each of these categories and how we execute on those. So obviously, retire is all about turn stuff off, get it off the network, get the gear out of the data centers, take the money, any residual value for those assets off the books. We capture those as value and return those back to the business. Rehost, lift and shift. Everybody knows and loves lift and shift, right? Take applications largely as they are, pick them up, move them over, put them back down on cloud. We started introducing new concepts we're calling lift and shift plus or rehost plus, where we're getting to introduce some pieces of modernization into the lift and shift process. Again, very thoughtfully and strategically tied to the specific architecture of the application, where we can bring a little more value out and get a little more maybe application lifecycle out. We'll make those investments as a part of rehost. But then really the long game for this program and ultimately the transformational lever for the company is all about modernization. So we took a lot of the R's at the tail end of the 6 R's and sort of smashed them into one category we broadly call modernization. Modernization entails things like putting infrastructure as code in pipelines and doing automated deployments of infrastructure, automating functional testing, automating our SDLC and integrating it with pipelines, automating security testing, end-to-end deployments of applications in a large part in an estate that to date, very low percentage-wise, has any sort of end-to-end automation. We still today build a lot of things automating in pockets. So yeah, we can create a server very quickly, but how does that server get connected to that database, get put behind a load balancer, get deployed into a landing zone, and get ultimately produced for the team to use it? That used to be a variety of activities all stitched together manually. Modernization Factory is taking those things, interrogating the architecture, re-architecting, and deploying end-to-end that capability. So when we deliver it back to the business, it's truly modernized, and we've changed the game in terms of how we support, manage, and operate that application. I give you all that detail because that's really important in terms of how we start to contemplate value associated with those particular applications in the portfolio. We had to get our modernization goals correct. We had to get the plumbing built in order to enable that modernization, to be able to then talk back to our customers, the business, about what does that actually mean for you in terms of your ability to deliver more quickly, as Fran made reference to. We need to go faster because they need to go faster because we're trying to cure cancer, right? It's a very important mission, and it's a very simple one, really, when you unpack it.
So Sean, let me talk a little bit about the process to capture that benefit. So, I don't think, I see a lot of my customers who are just counting, right? And not really validating that the value has been created. I think you guys have taken a really unique approach of capturing that value, validating that value, and actually taking out of the budget, right? So it's not vaporware, it's not vapor money, right? It's real money that's impacting your business units.
I think I've done a number of these programs throughout my career, and one of the really differentiating aspects of this particular program is the team we built around value capture. We recognized that it was a long pole in the tent. It's really hard to articulate value associated with modernizing something when you're talking about efficiency gains and what we lovingly call like squishy dollars, right? It's not real money until you can actually make it real money and then start to go after it. Chris, to your point, let's go find it. Let's find it in our portfolio investments. Let's find it in our budgets. And let's take that money, shrink what we need to deliver a particular capability, and redirect the rest of that money to delivering another capability or moving faster on something else. So that was the challenge at stake. In order to start to build that conversation more meaningfully with our business stakeholders and our portfolio managers, we needed to create a framework that we could sort of speak their language, right? It's not good enough for us to show up as IT people and be like, yeah, trust me, this CI/CD pipeline stuff is cool. It's going to make you save money. No, we need to work with finance. We need to work with IT finance in our strategy office, actual finance, our product teams as we're standing up product teams to understand total cost of ownership for everything, and then start to decompose the applications into particular pieces so that we could start to articulate that value in these meaningful chunks and talk to finance about, hey, this is how it works, this is what it costs, and I'll talk about this a little bit more on some of the slides that are coming up. So to underpin that, we built a very structured process by which we clearinghouse value from initial identification all the way through to finance agrees that this number that we put in front of them is real, and we're going to go and, Chris, to your point, take action on it somehow. Either take it out of a budget, take it out of a portfolio plan, move the money around to different programs. That's the game we're in over and over and over again. Application by application, architecture by architecture. We scrutinize it, we quantify it, we clear it through finance, we book the money, we move on to the next one. The problem with that, of course, though, is how do you scale that? And we'll start to touch on some of that scaling on the upcoming slides here.
Yeah, Sean, I really like that. There's no one can argue the savings at the end of the day, and that's what I really liked about this model. It's great. We got a plan. We built a plan from day one, right? It had a business case, but that's kind of validated every tranche, right?
Absolutely.
Set, right? And then it goes through that validation process, right? And with finance IT and with finance sitting there at the table with us, it can't be disputed, right? And I think there was some pushback at the beginning, right? You're really going to take the money away from me, but I feel like the other IT organizations are now get it.
One of the iterative learnings we had early on in the program as we were starting to build this framework was that we need to be able to go all the way down to the penny on any particular app that anyone wants to scrutinize. So you put your finger on an app on a giant spreadsheet list of applications, we can go to the value team and we can go find every single dollar that went into the calculation of that savings that we put into that sheet and got validated through finance. So everything from software licenses, hardware costs, efficiency gains, it's all there. It all ticks and ties, and now the challenge is, like I said, scaling it.
I love the fact that it's not just data center cost takeout. It's just not power, lights, hardware.
Yeah.
It's all the way through the people, the processes, both on the core IT as well as the application team.
Yeah, we actually intentionally excluded those things so that we wouldn't spend time trying to figure out, like if we take one virtual machine out of our data center in Charlotte, what does that cost? Like, we don't really care because we're after a bigger game here, right? The acceleration in the business value.
That's right. So can you talk a little bit about the categories? Like you mentioned it earlier, we all have had the squishy costs, hard costs, call them whatever you want, soft dollars, hard dollars. Can you talk about a little bit around how you guys define the different types of savings?
Yeah, so again, in the spirit of simplification, which is another thing we lean into a lot on this program, right, we wanted to really simplify this message, right? So we came up with 3 buckets, and I think Ron coined the phrase, value buckets.
Yeah.
So hard savings, that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. That's dollars we can go and get and take down immediately, right? The second category is cost avoidance, and this one has actually ended up being a pretty powerful lever for us. The ability to look across our portfolio of applications, find application ecosystems that are at or exceeding or nearing end of life in terms of their hosting capability today, largely that is in a data center, and then take those apps ahead of that cliff that they're going to hit in terms of a hardware refresh or a license refresh, get them to the cloud and avoid that investment and instead take that investment and put it back into something else. That has been a really, really powerful lever for us in the program to date. And it also helps us prioritize what we go after because we can use those things to drive our prioritization. Third bucket, that's where we're increasingly spending our time, and we will be spending our time on this bucket for the next couple years. Efficiencies and time liberated, something I lovingly call the Elvis dollars. The reason we call it Elvis dollars is because this is where the recurring saves come from. Much like in the music business, you write a hit record, you're a one-hit wonder, you're going to get paid on that thing forever. Every time it goes on the radio, you're going to get a little check, right? Every efficiency gain we can make, everything we can quantify in terms of time liberated in delivering a capability onto the production network, that money pays us back every single release for that application, be it Patch Tuesday patching or a new release that the development team is building, or an updated deployment from a COTS vendor who's got a new software version to deploy. Every single one of those things we can make faster, better, cheaper, pays us every single time in terms of labor efficiencies. That's what underpins the number that Fran threw out in terms of our business case target is labor efficiencies. Take the talent we have and make them work faster and more efficiently to deliver more, faster, faster, faster. That's the goal.
I love how it builds up, right? Start with the hard savings, cost avoidance, and then that kind of starts usually getting these soft dollars, which I think is different here, right? Is those soft dollars, they're not soft dollars, they're real dollars. You've turned them into real dollars. And then we'll talk a little bit later, then taking that to the next step and really driving the next part of business value. And what I really like, and I think we've seen across the tranches, is it's picked up momentum within the organization, right? It's picked up momentum in the program. I've seen a lot of cloud programs, they do the migrations, they stall, right? Because that value is not there. But because of that last point around, the efficiencies and that, those Elvis dollars, which I love because we're in Vegas, right? It just keeps paying back the program.
Yeah, it's been really exciting to work on that stuff with the team.
So I think a little bit, I remember when we started this program, when we first started talking, it was all modernized, right? We didn't want, Fran, I remember you saying, I don't want to just lift and shift, right? I want to modernize everything. Can you talk a little bit about how you kind of thought about the modernization strategy and also then kind of how the lift and shift, I hate using that word, but migrate came back in, right, to the program?
And maybe you could just bring in a couple of the things on the slide here. I'll talk to them as we go through. Another saying we have on the program is Texas two-step, which I'll attribute to Byron, if Byron's in the audience here somewhere. The Texas two-step is taking something like a rehost migration, recognizing that that application team or that product team isn't ready to modernize yet for one reason or another. We're going to rehost them, but then they go back in the list to come back around and be modernized later. The reason is that there is more value absolutely locked up in modernization. Just rehosting stuff is not going to get the job done. I think we've got plenty of data in the industry to prove that at this point, right? So we are contemplating everything we're doing, feeding factories from other factories as a way to keep that engine running. If you lift and shift something and we know it has limited lifespan, but we have to get it out of the data center, lift and shift it and immediately add it back into the list for the retire factory to come back around and get it. Right? If we rehost it and we know it's going to get modernized, immediately feed it into the funnel for the modernization factory to make sure we come around and get it. So all that sort of stuff is we're being very deliberate about using rehost sort of in the middle and then making a long-term decision. Does it go in the retire to get it off the network or does it go in the modernized to get it modernized? Very few things will ultimately live just as rehost targets. All right, so if we talk about modernization, I mentioned this is a big part of the program in terms of where we see a lot of the value locked up. In order to scale this, in the early days, what we did was individually, every architecture we would scrutinize, what did we change about this architecture? Did we introduce, CI/CD deployments? Did we introduce automated testing? And then start to try and manually quantify that savings. That works with 10 or 20 apps. That does not work when you have to do 500 or 1,000. So we took those learnings, stepped back, huddled up the team and said, all right, how can we start to build structures around this where we can take the learnings from the portfolio that we've already done in tranche 1 and tranche 2, back those into a framework that we can build using real data that we've derived from the applications we've already modernized and start to build models around this so we can programmatically determine, without even looking at the application architecture, other than a quick glimpse to know, hey, what is this thing? What's its data sensitivity classification? What's the relative risk? How big is it? How much data? Very basic statistics about an app. Slap a t-shirt size on it, and then understand what the maturity rating desired target is for that, and from that be able to derive estimated value associated with it so that we can then feed that estimated value back into our tranche planning. So we can look across the portfolio and say, hey, we've got 14 medium apps coming up next month. Do we really need to do all those 14, or should we swap those 14 out with one extra large one that returns more value than the 14 medium ones? Let's take our talent and redeploy them to a higher value target. We're beginning to have those sorts of conversations about taking the team we have and the talent we have and deploying them to the applications that make the biggest impact in terms of business value. I'll talk one more second about this framework because it's really important. T-shirt sizing in terms of the application sizes underpin this, right? So small, medium, large, extra large. AWS has been using T-shirt sizing forever in terms of articulating ranges of sizes of things. But more importantly is quantifying value associated with specific aspects of the modernization of an application. So we have literally decomposed the modernization activities that we perform architecture by architecture, app by app, into its component parts. And I think we're up to something like 22 component parts for a modernization activity. That would be things like, are you doing automated functional testing? Are you integrated with the digital SDLC? Are you doing automated vulnerability scanning? Are you using containers? How are you deploying? Are you using CI and CD? On and on and on. We've decomposed that whole thing, and for each piece of that modernization and deployment experience, we're beginning to build models around each and every one of those pieces. So if you're a database and you're moving off of, say, Oracle on EC2 or Oracle on a virtual machine to Oracle RDS, what is the value associated with that, what is today a fairly trivial change to get a database off of a server and onto RDS? But that's labor we no longer have to do because the shared responsibility model has moved that labor to AWS. So we are able to now quantify for each and every database we move what value we capture from getting it onto RDS, and then take that and apply it to the entirety of the estate, which in our company is thousands of databases, and start to realize there's real money here locked up in that. For each category I just rattled off, and again, there's like 22 of them, there's dollars locked up in each and every one of those. So the game we're in now is clearing those categories through our validation process, getting everyone to understand and recognize that, yes, indeed, there are hard dollars associated with doing a fully automated deployment, and now working with our application owners, product owners, and business stakeholders so that they can understand and start to work differently, using and recognizing that, hey, if I invest in skills on my team to be able to build and deploy an application this way, I can do 12 releases instead of 2. I can have that team work on 3 products instead of 1, and I can get value out that I would never have expected to see otherwise. And it's creating a number of really important conversations across all of our lines of business, and really stressing the model, asking hard questions about every penny that we're identifying, but more importantly, making them think differently about, hey, I'd like to do 12 releases a year rather than 2. And what does that mean to the business?
Yeah, I love it that you're not making technical decisions because of the technology, right? It's a value decision,
yep.
Right? So it may run just fine, right? But it may be more value of moving it, right, than leaving it where it's at. So I think it's a completely different way of looking at things. So we're 2 years into this, right? I want to talk a little bit about lessons learned, and I'm going to start, Ron, with you. I'm going to ask you to talk about the future here in a little bit, but to date, what would you say is your number one lesson learned out of this program?
Yeah, I mean, really 2 things come to mind. Really tactically, the financial rigor that Sean and the team talked about. We got a locked arms, tight relationship with finance from the start. So this isn't a case where we're trying to measure results and kind of convince finance. Finance is in the trenches with our team. Every one of these financial reviews we do. I think that was key, and that's really carried the success so far. And then 2 is this approach of doing this in tranches. I mean, Fran and Sean and I went to our senior executive team, our CEO, and when we first got the project approved, and I think they were a little skeptical. Like, can you deliver this stuff? And we said, look, we're going to do it in tranches. We're going to come back after tranche 1. We're going to show you what we planned, what we accomplished, and we were able to do that. So I think breaking it up into those chunks was critical.
Awesome. Fran, what about you?
Maybe beyond what Ron described, which are personally important and game changers for us, is the top-down sponsorship that we've had for this program. To build on Ron's point, when we first had discussion with our executive team about our intention and how this would work, there was a healthy dose of skepticism And we were able to channel or redirect that skepticism effectively into advocacy. And with that advocacy, we have just a terrific platform to advance this program and garner the collective attention of anyone within the Merck community that needs to play a role in this. And because of the approach that we're taking, systematically going through every application in the state, you can imagine there's lots of people who'd rather not be bothered by us. Yep. Go away, come back later, but that's not an option. When our CEO talks about this, in public platforms in front of the whole company, and that's been an experienced learning for me.
Hey, Sean, why don't you tell a story about showing your CEO, Rob, what you guys were doing? I thought it was really interesting that, CEO, what you guys showed them and how he got really interested in the program.
Yeah, I think the top-down sponsorship has been key, but more importantly, the top-down challenging and gauntlet throwing has been really important because it makes us, it's the top one here on the list, it makes us continuously scrutinize how we're doing it and what we're doing, right? So a couple quick Rob stories. We had Rob Davis, our CEO. We've had the privilege of presenting to him several times about this program. The very first meeting when we were pitching the business case, as we were walking out, he pulls me aside and he's like, "Hey, Finnerty, don't make this thing take 5 years and hold me hostage and not deliver value." He's like, "I want to see you back here in 6 months and I want to see that you guys are crushing it," right? I took that very much to heart as we started this thing, and it really helped us shape the tranche model that we build. It's like, all right, we're going to take a swing at this. We're going to spend 6 months. We're going to earn the right to do the next one. And I want to go back into that boardroom, and I want to throw that in front of Rob and be like, we did it. Let's do another one, right? And that sort of mentality of show, tell, challenge, continuously improve was really, really important. The other thing that's been effective in the program in helping show this is we demo a lot. We use, we lean in on agile methodology, demo days. We run a lot of tech demos, end of sprint demos, you name it. We took that to the CEO, to the boardroom, and we're like, hey, the next time we're going to go back and see Rob, we're going to bring our partners from MRL with us, some of whom are in the audience here, and we're going to show our CEO what's possible for artificial intelligence, machine learning, live in the context of a BlueSky modernized application. And it was a huge hit for him to be able to just sit there and see these are real people working in our labs using tools that didn't exist 4 months ago that are now happy customers of this new modernized experience. It was a real game changer. Now we've taken that same approach, figured, hey, if it works well with the CEO, we'll use it all over the place. So now we're demoing to everybody to show them this is what's possible, and it really has moved the needle.
I loved that you guys didn't bring it down a level. You guys took him through the automation, showed exactly how the application teams would go in, provision the environment all the way to the automation. And the story I heard, I wasn't there, but I heard his eyes lit up. It's like, this is how fast this happened, and they got to do this all on their own. They didn't have to pick up and put a ticket in with IT to make it happen.
That's it.
I wanted to add to that. I think I know I underestimated the power of that kind of demo. Because in the demo in the session that Sean was discussing, Fran, Sean, and I were all there. We showed some basic stuff of, hey, look, you can start up an instance. When you don't need it, you can turn it off. You're not paying for it anymore. And just those basic things like that. And the whole leadership team, multiple people in the leadership team chimed in and said, wait a minute, you mean I can turn off stuff if I don't need it? So this is basic cloud stuff that we all know of every day, but for people who don't live in that world every day, it's a new concept. And so showing them in person is pretty
The CFO was particularly interested.
Yeah, the CFO.
Yeah. I have one other reflection that I'd be remiss if I didn't share, given we're here to talk about value. And it was after that check-in that Sean promised we'd be invited to at the conclusion of Tranche 1. And we led in with, hey, this was the goal that we had started with as it relates to OKRs for value achieved, retirements, modernizations, and rehosts. Here's what we actually delivered. And in that room, Rob turned to the CFO and said, you buy these numbers? And she said, yep. And that was that. And now this is how we talk about the program in the context of, regular status reports. And you just don't have a platform for that without the investment we made in this value capture framework that Sean described.
Yeah, I don't think they would have bought it without that framework, the validation process, and obviously you guys have said having finance there from the very beginning. Okay, so awesome. Hey, we're modernizing, we're migrating, and things like that. But there is driving significant value from cost savings and efficiencies and things like that. But Ron, talk about how are you going to take this and keep this going, right? Because at the end of the day, right, that's great, but it's really now about taking that further into the business.
Yeah, so the work we've done to date, we've uncovered a lot of keys to success, and I think pitfalls to avoid that Sean and the team have done a great job in working through. But the takeaway is it's really a maturity curve or an evolution, which you'll see on this slide. But I break it up into pieces. Way back 2 years ago, when people were very skeptical around does cloud stuff even work? What's the point of this? We had to just prove, technically, can we even move anything to the cloud, right? Can we even do this on a small experimental scale, which we were able to do? That then built to, can we build a real business case and execute tranche one and meet those results? I mean, that was kind of the next step. Now can we do it at greater scale? Can we go into tranche two and tranche three? So there's been this kind of journey to kind of slowly build up our capability and credibility that's been critical. And there are a couple of things that were really important. We mentioned before having finance, right alongside us, right in lockstep with us. We wouldn't be in the position we're in if that didn't happen. The other thing, two other interesting things is, we made a conscious decision early on, because there's a lot of cloud transformations that go on, a lot of different ideas about how to do this. We made a decision, hey, early on, this is going to be IT driven and centrally driven, right? And there are people, and I've seen in the past myself, there's people with different opinions on that. This shouldn't be an IT thing. We just said, look, let's start it that way. Let's get our sea legs under us, build that credibility, build the capability, then we can move on to that. So we received differing opinions on that, but that's what we decided to do, and I think that was the right decision. The other thing, as we go through this technology curve and maturity curve, is talking about skills and talent. So obviously we're working with Accenture is a great partner, AWS is a great partner with us, but we also have to be mindful of, we need people on our payroll that understand this stuff, that are in the key roles. And look, we will partner with a lot of different third-party partners that we work with, but what we didn't want to do. What we didn't want to do is hand the keys over to third parties and say, you guys do this for us, right? So really what it is people like Sean and a lot of his teams are here. We have the expertise on our payroll, and then we still partner with third parties as that, give us some external ideas or some additional horsepower, additional arms and legs. That model's, I think, been really important. We have to keep watching it as we go through this, but I think that's been really important as well. But what's on the slide is basically, you'll see a curve from the things I talked about, starting very tactically, very IT focused. As you get through kind of towards the right side of the slide, we're already starting to talk less about how many servers and applications. We're now starting to talk with the business about what's the business value, what's the way we can transform the business. And we're just starting that now, but that's really where we want to see this discussion shift from a technology centrally driven discussion to a business transformation discussion that really the business and the divisions are more involved with. And the parting message, I guess if you go to the next slide, is the closing slide here. Chris and Fran did a great point that I want to reiterate. So our business is saving and improving lives. Like that's what our business is. So when we're doing this cloud work, it's not just I shut down an on-premise server and moved it to the cloud. It's not just I shut down a database and use this cool database service. I mean, the things that we're doing, directly or indirectly, are saving and improving lives. Like that's the end game. So what the next step, now going forward is, we've got a great track record of, cost savings, agility, more automation, moving stuff to the cloud. Now it's looking forward, using all that and the financial results, using all of that stuff using that credibility we've built up, right? Now let's go to the business about how do we transform the business. And we're already involved in discussions. I can't go into all the specifics, but things like, how can we use elastic, scalable computing power to prevent our scientists from having to wait or increase their throughput, right? How can we use cloud-based automation to prevent our talented, in all our divisions, to prevent our talented people from, kind of wrangling data to just having that automated. And so, whether it's our research labs or manufacturing or animal health or human health or even our corporate functions, if we can use the credibility that we've built to date and the ideas and experience we've built to date and just kind of find ways to radically change how we do stuff for even greater value. That's the end game. That's the next chapter and I think we're positioned to do that. We're just on the precipice of having that conversation.
I think that's one of my biggest lessons learned is that, I would say I was probably one of the people pushing for business value up front, right?
Yeah.
Hey, let's really go and, and I think the way we approached it, the way you guys approached it, built enough credibility to go have those conversations. I think the other thing, my lesson learned, we didn't talk a lot about it, was big rocks. So we have the concept of big rocks, right? So something that's can't just go through the factory. It's a project on itself, right? Whether that's SAP or whatever else. And I think calling those out and getting those in each of the tranches to really drive, hey, this isn't just something simple that was being done. These are massive, critical, system critical, or company critical applications. Had a big impact on the program so far.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll, I don't know if we can take some questions. I think we're happy to. We got a few minutes left here. But while you guys are thinking of questions, so I asked the question earlier, Sean, right? BlueSky, really?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
There's no clouds in the sky.
Whiffed
right?
on
In
answering
BlueSky. So, talk a little bit, because I think even from the name, it shows how you thought about this thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting little story. So it actually started with the song "Blue Sky," from ELO.
You're not gonna sing it?
No, but the cool way that the name has evolved, and I think is really pertinent to this conversation, right? When I talk about the name Blue Sky, I always get asked the question, why'd you call it Blue Sky? There's no clouds in the sky, and you guys are moving everything in the clouds. I'm like, oh, there's clouds in the sky, but beyond the cloud, there's blue sky, right? So it's not about the cloud, it's about what's on the other side of the cloud journey. I sort of made that up on a whim when I was just having a conversation, about 6 months ago, and it really stuck. Like, it's true, right? This isn't just about moving things to the cloud. This is about doing it for all the reasons that these guys up here just talked about, right? Business value, saving and improving lives, scientific research, manufacturing. I love the cloud. I'm a, dyed-in-the-wool cloud nerd. But I really, at the end of the day, I don't really care about the cloud in so much as it's a means to an end. It's a means to business outcomes. It's a means to us transforming how we work and how we deploy. Yeah, AWS is awesome, and I love all the tools and capabilities, but we need to save and improve lives, right? And that's what it's all about. So what's on the other side of the cloud?
That's awesome. That's a great way. So I think we got mics up here if you want to stand up and ask a question.